You want to learn how to play like the best Warlocks in Destiny 2? In today's video, I'm going to be showing you what the top players do so you can begin implementing these tips into your game to improve your Warlock play in PvP. When I first switched from Hunter to Warlock back in Destiny 1, I was absolutely terrible and I felt helpless without my Hunter dodge on Night Stalker. Because of tips like the ones I'll show you today and a lot of hours put in, that I've been able to master the Warlock class. So whether you're brand new to Warlock or a veteran with years on the class, you'll find this video helpful. With that said, this video includes tips that are foundational to the class and will be useful no matter when you're finding this video. This video is going to be broken down into multiple topics which include movement, rift usage, subclass, exotics, and how to invest your stats on Warlock. You'll also find that all these topics timestamped down below. Now let's get into the video, and if you find any part of the video helpful, consider dropping a like to help support the channel. Movement is key on any class in Destiny 2, and I could argue even more important on Warlock. Choosing the wrong jump can be the difference between you escaping a fight or getting caught floating too much or moving too slowly and losing engagement. While this may seem super basic, and it is, it's critical for successful Warlock gameplay that we are choosing the right jump. That jump is Burst Glide. Burst Glide allows you to move across the map in a more linear fashion, unlike Strafe Glide or Balance Glide. The reason for this is because Burst Glide, like the name sounds, gives you a burst of momentum that can build to a certain point, allowing you to chain together multiple jumps and turn it into what is called Warlock Skating. Warlock Skating is the most efficient way to get around the map on Warlock, since you can build that momentum and get around the map faster. This allows us to get to choke points, heavy ammo, and general points of interest on the map before our enemies, giving us map control. The other thing to note is an ability like Icarus Dash on Top Tree Dawn benefits greatly from Burst Glide, since that momentum will help you gain more speed going into your Icarus Dash. Now it would be careless of me if when it came to Warlock movement I didn't talk about Blink. Blink is an ability that gives you a short distance teleport, and while it sounds cool on the surface, there is a reason you find most top tier Warlock players aren't using this ability. That's because of two main reasons. One, it's rather easy to predict where a player is teleporting since there is a trail that indicates the direction they are going, and a good player will either kill you before your blink animation completes or be able to easily predict where you are blinking to. The second reason is that your weapon ready speed and the time it takes for your radar to be visible again are both impacted as you come out of blink. This makes your weapons react slower and can make coming out of blink disorienting if you lose track of your enemy, as having no radar even temporarily can leave you flying blind. There's an exotic that can help you overcome these downsides, but giving up an exotic armor slot is a lot to ask, especially when there are better jump options. But more on exotics later. Before we start discussing our rifts, I want to quickly mention my community Discord where you can show off your roles, builds, and even Destiny fashion. We also have tons of very knowledgeable players looking to help people improve. Link is in the description. The Warlock Rift can easily be one of the most powerful class abilities in the game when used correctly. With that in mind, I want to cover the most important best practices for using your Rift, and that's Rift placement, or what I call the 50-50 rule. This rule is meant to be an easy way to remember how you should be placing your Rift. When placing your Rift, you want 50% of your Rift exposed outside of cover and 50% behind the cover. What this rule allows you to achieve is the ability to peek in and out of cover and take shots without stepping outside of your Rift. This is critical since the second you step outside your Rift, any health regen or damage buffs are immediately gone. You want to always be placing your Rift near cover with the idea that if you take too much damage, you can easily break line of sight from your enemy and regenerate your health. If you pop your Rift away from cover, whether using healing or empowering Rift, if a good player is landing all their shots, the regen won't be enough to keep you alive. Since the Rift radius is based on where you're standing, the best way to ensure you have 50% of the Rift outside of cover is to bring yourself right up to the edge of cover and pop your Rift. This brings me to my other best practice that really plays off the 50-50 rule, and it's relatively simple, and that's always play your Rift. Once you get your Rift set up around cover, you need to play around that Rift as much as possible. It can be very easy to get impatient or a little greedy when using a Rift, but the second you leave that Rift or keep your head out of cover too long, you're going to get punished by the enemy team for it. The purpose of implementing the 50-50 rule is to position our Rift so we can maximize our survivability while engaging the enemy team. The last major tip for using your Rift is to take advantage of the fact that when you use your Rift, this takes you into a third-person view. You want to use this view to peek around cover to gain more information on your enemy's movements as you pop your Rift. This will give you more information on where to place your crosshairs as you come out of cover. Using this tactic has allowed me to see my opponents pushing and be better prepared for that engagement. By implementing these three tips in your game, you'll find yourself surviving more engagements and winning 1v3s in the Crucible. Your subclass is a huge part of how you play Destiny 2, and while there are always going to be quote-unquote meta options, update and patches can change to what those options are in a heartbeat. So instead of focusing on a specific subclass you should choose, I found it would be more helpful to focus on the idea of understanding your kit, so no matter what subclass you choose, you can be successful with it. This starts with asking a fundamental question of whatever subclass you're using. What is the strongest or most standout aspect of this subclass? Depending on your subclass, this answer may vary. For some subclasses, it's the power of the super, and for others, it's the strength of the neutral game. Answering this question question is key and help you define if this subclass fits your playstyle, as well as what exotics you will choose and stats you will invest in. For example, the strongest or most standout feature of Top Tree Dawnblade would be its movement capabilities and overall neutral game. Based on that, I want to invest in stats and exotics that will enhance that aspect of the subclass. So for Top Tree Dawn, I can see that getting kills while in Heat Rises regens my melee, and I get Heat Rises by using my grenade. Because of that, I may want to invest more in my discipline stat to lower the cooldown of my grenade, activate Heat Rises more, and use my powerful melee ability more frequently. You also have Icarus Dash as well, so because of this, I may choose Transversive Steps as my exotic to help further improve my movement on this subclass, allow me to get around the map even faster. As you can see, answering that initial question is really what helped guide a lot of the decisions I just made in this hypothetical scenario. Once you fully understand the kit of a subclass, you can then analyze how a certain subclass fits with your playstyle. Going back to our example of Top Tree Dawnblade, this is a very popular selection of Warlocks who main Sniper, since they can quickly change angles or get out of a bad spot. For me, since I don't main a Sniper, I don't usually run Top Tree Dawn, and I actually prefer Bottom Tree Dawnblade for its survivability and strong super. This brings me to my final point on this topic, and that's don't feel the need to default to what's most popular. Try out different subclasses and builds and find what works best for your playstyle. If you found this video helpful so far, consider subscribing so you don't miss any future tip videos just like this one. Exotics on Warlock can be very influential on how efficient you are in the Crucible, and like your subclass, your playstyle and understanding what parts of your game you value the most will influence which exotic you're going to pick. For example, if you value your movement above everything else, then Transversive Steps will be a great choice. On the other hand, if the reactiveness and feel of your weapons is king in your mind, then Apathettic Aspect is going to be your #1 choice. Regardless of your exotic choice, it's important to understand how it pairs with your subclass of choice and playstyle. I found I chose an exotic based on one or two things. Either my exotic is helping me overcome a pain point on my Warlock, or it's helping me enhance a strong point in my game or subclass that I want to be even stronger. I also prefer exotics that are always on or very easy to activate. A good example of this is of course Transversive Steps, since they are always on, but another great option is the Stag and the damage reduction it gives in our Rift. Our Rift is something we should always be using anyway, and having an exotic tied to it will typically be easy to take advantage of. Now the last thing I'll mention on exotics is to make sure as you play Destiny to keep multiple copies of the same exotic, since all of them will have different stat distributions. This will allow you to change and sub out different copies to help you better achieve the specific stat distribution you're looking for, and allow you to adapt to any meta changes that will inevitably occur. How you invest your stats on your Warlock can help you immediately improve in the Crucible with lower cooldowns of your abilities, higher health, and in some cases more supers per game. Starting with the most important stat on any class, but is even more important on Warlock, and that's recovery. Recovery is responsible for how fast your health begins recharging after being damaged in the Crucible, and on Warlock is directly tied to how fast your Rift recharges. Investing in a recovery stat will directly impact your survivability in Destiny 2, and when you're trying to improve, it's generally easier to die less than kill more, but dying less can result in more kills overall. This also allows us to take advantage of the power of our Rift much more frequently per game. Looking at the different tiers of cooldown to our Rift, by going to 60 recovery versus 100, you're looking at over a 20-second increase in your Rift cooldown on top of making it take longer to regain your health. This is why for recovery, I recommend always running 100 recovery or 90 recovery at the absolute lowest. The impact of this stat on Warlock is just too great to run anything lower. Next, we have mobility, and this, depending on what you value, may or may not be a great stat for you to focus on. If you value your base movement speed, so not your sprint speed but more your strafe speed, then mobility may rank higher for you. This is also where your exotic choice comes into play, because if you're running Transversive Steps, which improve your sprint speed, then you may not care about mobility as much. Mobility will make your strafe and gunfights feel faster. What I've found is that most guns, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't do enough to throw off most players' aim. This is why I prefer to run Transversive Steps and I run 20 mobility, but if you feel the difference and value this stat, I wouldn't recommend going much higher than 40 mobility. Resilience is our next stat, and one that I find a lot of players undervalue. Resilience, to keep it short, will directly impact how accurate someone has to be to kill you, since resilience directly ties into your health. On screen, I have the health values for each level of resilience courtesy of my friend Castle, and a bunch of testing he did on resilience specifically. Link in the description if you want an even deeper dive into this topic, but what you need to know is higher resilience forces your enemy to be more accurate in most cases in order to maintain an optimal time to kill. Based on Castle's testing and my own hours spent playing, I found 6 resilience to be the sweet spot when it further improves my survivability and it's not having to dump all my stats into resilience. If I were to say where I rank resilience in terms of importance, I would say it probably falls to number 3 behind our next stat, discipline. Discipline impacts how quickly our grenade recharges, and I didn't really find this stat super valuable before. Then came patch 3.4.0, which changed ability cooldowns, The more you get them, less and the cooldown changes depending on the strength of your grenade. This made me value my discipline stat much more, since now grenades can be much more impactful in a fight. This led me to land on the sweet spot at 80 discipline, but this can change depending on the subclass and grenade you choose. As a good rule of thumb, I try to land my grenade cooldown as close to 1 minute or under as possible, while making sure I'm not going over 80 discipline, because at that point, you start to see diminishing returns. Next we have Intellect, which controls the base cooldown of our super, and like all abilities, Bungie has made some serious changes here as well. Bungie has put all supers in different tiers that give different supers based on their strength a longer or shorter cooldown. This was specifically done to reduce just how influential the Intellect stack is, and getting your super is hinged more on dealing damage and taking damage. So while I still value this stat, it's not nearly as important as it used to be. But that said, Castle has another video testing the new Intellect changes, and I'll leave that link in the description. But the guy's a freak. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he just loves testing all this stuff. But based on that video and my own playtime, I found anywhere from 50 to 60 Intellect to be optimal in terms of having a reasonable base cooldown, and with the right number of kills, how quick you can get your super per game. I could see someone wanting to go as high as 70, but wouldn't recommend going much higher when those stats could be better served invested elsewhere. Strength is our final stat, and it impacts the cooldown of our charged melee ability, and unless you're running a very specific build, I use the same rule of thumb I use for discipline here as well. I try to land my cooldown around 1 minute regardless of my subclass, which typically lands me around 50 strength, and that is more than adequate. So let's review. In terms of the 3 most important stats you're going to want to invest the most in, recovery at 100 and discipline at 80, or whatever brings that cooldown to roughly 1 minute or less. From there, resilience is your 3rd most important stat, and 60 is going to be the sweet spot here. By prioritizing these stats, you'll be doing the most to set yourself up for success on Warlock. If you're looking to define what the best subclass for Warlock is, check out the video at the top, or if you're looking to use the power of Axiom bolts, check out the video on the bottom.